All right, so how are we doing here this morning? Just checking to see if we went live. And if we did, hooray! Yes, we did. Hey, look at that. You guys, I may have actually gotten this sorted out. Wouldn't that be something? So, I am here and working on this month's Patreon map. I'm trying something new with the way that I am doing coastlines and deciduous forests. Hi, guys! Hi, Patrick. Hi, John. So yeah, this is kind of the new thing that I'm working on, whereas this is the watercolor that I did after we finished the stream on, I think it was Monday. And then I've been adding deciduous forests and like texture in the ground using stippling in greens and browns, which is very different from how I normally work. I really like how it's giving me the impression of leafy canopy trees, which is something that I have struggled with this whole bloody time. And I'm also super loving that this does look like it's underwater, at least like to me. I think it turned out well to kind of give you the idea of those shelves of shallower water. So yeah, I'm so far pretty happy with this. So today the goal is to get through all of the texturing. I want to have this up for my Patreon tonight. I have to go away for the weekend, so it's going to be a bit of a marathon to get this finished today and get it out to my people. And then I can hopefully go have a weekend that I'm not worried about work. Saxon's going to be in a kennel, so I don't have to worry about him. And it's just going to be pretty great, I think. So I'm excited. How are you guys doing? What's new? What is going on in your world? Also, I think it might be safe to say that I'm starting to get the knack of getting this stream going, which makes me super excited. I think the big debate I have now is whether or not I start paying like $25 American a month to get rid of that Stage 10 logo that's up in the corner. I could write it off as a business expense, but it just seems so silly to pay money to get rid of a logo. I don't know. Thoughts, all the thoughts. Nice. I hope you have better weather than what we have here right now. Today is just, it's only raining by the grace of God, I swear. Like, it feels so cold outside that I am expecting this to turn into snow any bloody minute. They're calling for snow for us for Sunday. There's a 30% chance. And there's a giant storm warning going for southern Alberta right now. We've already had a couple of nights of hard frost, and I'm just like, you guys, it's September. I mean, we used to get winters that started this early when I was a kid, and we haven't for years, and I think that that's climate change. But oof, I've gotten used to not having them start for so long. And now it's just like, oh my, what do you mean it's going to be cold for this much longer? I'm also not thrilled about the rain because it means Saxon's feet are a muddy, muddy mess every time he comes in from the yard. And I hate washing floors so much. I kind of love the benefit of being able to see this on my computer screen while I'm working on it, because I can look up and see where like the dark light balance is, and that's just super handy. Kind of makes me wonder if I should always just have the camera up. I don't have to stream it every time, but if I just have the camera up, then it's easier to tell kind of where things are going. Mutilated a 03 pen. Did you cut the nib? What do you mean? Also, which brush pen set did you get? I didn't know there was a set. I haven't really looked, but I didn't know there was one. Because I've been using their large brush pen for a while to do my pine trees, and I really love it. But if there's a couple smaller versions, I am into that idea so much. The closest I've found to like a smaller brush pen has been this Tombow. It's got a hard nib as opposed to like a proper brush. I love that. But it's not necessarily water fast, and I need that for the stuff that I'm doing. So it would be really great to find a water fast version. That would make me pretty happy. And like the microns are always my go-to for that. That must have been some precision blade work. That's not a small nib. Or that's not a large nib. Oh, cannot word today apparently. Huh. So it's 3 brush tips in a 0, 1, a 0, 5, and an 8. I'm gonna have to go look for that because that just thrills me. I'm picking up Gold Leaf this weekend. I'm super excited about that. I think that is going to be awesome. Are either of you doing Inktober or that Wicked World Building thing? Oops. I can hear Saxon running in his sleep in the next room. He's just the cutest sometimes. You need to save it somewhere then, Patrick. Put it somewhere you can find it when you need it. I've seen a lot of people who are like prepping for Inktober, and I'm like, oh man, people prep for this? Like, maybe that's why I've never made it through a whole month, as I don't prep. I just do it by the seat of my pants, whatever's going on for me that day. So I feel like perhaps I've been a slacker. I need to learn a different way to do it. There's someone that I follow on Instagram who's doing it on tan paper with black and white ink and possibly a little bit of color. And I love the idea of that. Like, I have a tan paper sketchbook that I bought quite some time ago that I haven't gotten into because I've been a little bit intimidated by it. But something like Inktober or Wicked World Building, where it's a limited time thing and there's like a lot of structure, might be a really good way for me to kind of step into that and at the very least use the supplies, which is sometimes a challenge for me. I get really confident and comfortable with the stuff that I know, which prevents me from getting into newer things that I'm less confident with. I don't like trying new things in front of people where I can make a fool of myself. It's a character flaw. So maybe that will be a good opportunity to work on that. That's fair. I'm not good at cleaning out my downloads either. Hi, Doodle. What you doing? Yes, I'm doing this twice in 1 week. What do you think of that? I'm going pixelated, okay? All right. Let me know if any of this changes anything. Is that better? Morning, Laura. How you doing, babe? Okay, thank you. It always looks slightly pixelated to me on my monitor. So I do rely on you guys very much to let me know if things are getting hinky on your sides of things. Because it's impossible for me to tell on my side. They've had a bunch of like really large munitions live fire ranges going on base the last couple of days, so if you hear some giant thuds, that's what that is. I can hear them. I don't know if it's coming through on the mic. Wanted posters for the kitties. Are you guys keeping Pistachio? You named the floofs. Nice. That's exciting. Fred and George. Well, it's gonna get you bonus points with the Harry Potter crowd. Okay. These ones are Staedtler. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. The Triplus fine liners. I have the big box of, I forget how many is in here, 40 or 45 or something. And then these ones with the black are by Mapped, M-A-P-E-D, and they're called Graph Peps. I got these ones at Staples. I think they were 25 or 30 bucks for the pack. I really love the color saturation and they're very comfortable to hold. Their nib size is really nice. These ones I think I bought at Delta, but they're everywhere now. And they were more. I think they were 40 bucks for the pack. Again, super comfortable to hold. The nib size is smaller. They don't lay down quite as much pigment as the Map do. But they're really nice to work with, and the variety of colors is super good. Oh, good. I'm glad it's resolved for you. Yay. The only paint pens that I'm really using a lot of lately is, where are they now? The Posca paint markers. These ones. So they're by Uniball and they have a nice thin like marker tip and they come in bigger tips to be fair. But I really like the texture of the liquid that they lay down and they don't seem to clog up nearly as much as some of the other paint markers that I've tried. I bought some of the really expensive Maltao ones. Let me see, I have two of them on my desk right now. These guys. And these are far more expensive than the Poscas. And they're acrylic as well. And I just find that the tips get gummed up so fast when I'm working with them. As long as I can keep the tips clean, they're fun to work with. I like how broad they are. They're not nearly as narrow tip as the Posca though, like you can see that in the camera, I think. But very opaque, good to work with in that regard. What I love about the Maltaus is that they go up to really huge sizes. This is a different brand. I've only ever bought this one. I don't love it. But the Maltaus come up in a marker that's this size. So if you're working with paint pens, you can get a nice chunky tip to do all kinds of things with. So paint pens are still pretty new to me. Definitely haven't done a lot with them. But I'm enjoying them when I do use them. So that's been cool. Hey Naglis, how are you? I generally don't wash off the tip, Patrick. Generally, like if I'm only working on stuff that's dry, so there shouldn't be a lot of pickup on the tip. If there is, I tend to just go drag it on like a separate piece of paper on the border or something like that until the tip cleans itself. I don't ever want to add liquid to an acrylic tip because if you start messing with the composition of the paint in the tip, you may affect the flow of the paint from the inside of the barrel to the rest of the tip. And so I don't want to cause any problems with that because basically you can't get into those pens to fix them. So you just end up with a dead tip and that's a waste of a pen. I am not rich enough that I can afford to be monkeying with supplies like that. One day. But yeah, I find the best way to clean the tips, even for my Copics, like when I'm using these guys, the tips get really manky because I'm forever layering stuff. And I just go to the side and keep brushing with it until it cleans off. The best thing about Copics is I can re-ink them. So if they get empty or whatever, I can just fill them again. And I love that because, like, sure, they're expensive, but I'm never going to have to throw out that marker body. I can replace the nibs. I can re-ink the barrels. Like, environmentally, it's just one of the best systems I've found. The Copics don't do everything, but I sure love working with them. They do a lot for an alcohol-based marker. I've just gotten more used to working in watercolor the last little while. I love the ease of it. I love the vibrancy of the colors. So that's been really cool for me. I like working in Copics when I want something that's really smooth. Because you can do beautiful smooth blends with a Copic. I'm still working on my blends with watercolors. That's fair, Patrick, completely. And I'm kind of like mini painting is something that I picked up about the same time as I started mapping, but I've done artistic stuff that's covered both for a lot of my life. Like going to minis was just going to a 3D, much, much smaller canvas. I'd been painting on large flat canvases for a really long time at that point. Um, the map making, like I've been drawing for a huge part of my life. Like I think I started drawing when I was 5, and I never really started or stopped. Well, that's not true. I had a couple years where I couldn't, like about 5, but I don't think I lost any talent or skill at that point. It was just a matter of not being able to progress in my practice. So it feels really good to be back to it now. I don't know, Neglis. I don't think you missed much. Just many, many, many hundreds of little dots. Oh no. Patrick, you're incredibly talented. I don't know that I was talented so much as like I was very persistent. There was a lot of BS that went on in my home life that made it very much that I needed to entertain myself and preferably doing things that were quiet. So I don't know when I started drawing. Like I was really, really young and I just kept at it. Like Laura went to high school with me, so she can attest to the fact that like I always had a sketchbook on me and I was always drawing. And if I wasn't drawing on a sketchbook, I was drawing on people or my pants or like at one point I convinced them to let us paint on the roof of the home ec room. I don't know how I succeeded in doing that. Um, but I wouldn't say I'm good. I'm just stubborn. Like, and I think being stubborn long enough pays off. You end up learning things that you wouldn't have learned if you gave up on it earlier. So I think it's really cool that you're drawing because, like, if it's out of the blue for you, I'm proud of you for getting started. Like, that's totally awesome. Totally, totally awesome. What did you start painting minis for? Did you play like Warhammer or something? Flames of War. My husband plays that. I am very familiar with Flames of War. It is one of Dave's great laments that I hate painting tanks. Um, they are boring because they all look the same. Yeah, Naglas, I can totally see that. That's really cool. Oh, that's really neat, Patrick. Right on. Dave hasn't been able to go to nationals for about 3 years now, but he placed third in the country for Canada a couple years ago. So that was really cool. I was proud of him. I don't really like care, but he was happy to have made the achievement, so I was happy for him. I frequently drop him off at his tournaments and say, "Have fun storming the castle, boys," and then leave and go do something else. Because I cannot sit there and just watch dice being rolled. Not unless there's treasure in the dungeon. That's my restriction. Oh, it's all good, Laura. I was saying about like we were talking about like being a talented kid or whatnot. I said that I wasn't sure that I was a talented kid. I was just stubborn. I drew all the time. And I said, you and I went to high school together, and you can attest to the fact that I was forever having a sketchbook on me. And that if I wasn't drawing in my sketchbook, I was drawing on people or on my pants or even on the roof of the home ec room. It was very much something that I was constantly doing. All the time, all the time, all the time. I wouldn't say that I'm very good. I just did it forever. I think that makes a huge difference. Oh, my maps are never topographic. I am totally someone who's just making this up as I go. I definitely want to put more time into learning geography, but my stuff is very stylized, and I don't really make too many apologies for that. I do not remember a wall mural, although there are chunks of high school that I just do not recall. So maybe, maybe not. Thanks, Patrick. Really? I would love to see that picture. There are not very many photos from me from that period of time. Poetry connoisseur, excellent. Like you wrote stuff on stalls for kicks? That's really cool, Nicholas. We definitely did not have those as options when I was going to school. Some of the better schools in our country have stuff like that, but the one that we went to definitely did not. I don't know, social studies was useful for me because it actually focused for me on some of the Canadian stuff, which we never bloody hear about otherwise. Canada is super good at ignoring its own history, and I think that that's dangerous. Hey man, we all need bathroom bards. Bathroom bards are how we get through the world. We all need a good funny joke or a story. Social studies is kind of like history, except that it's not necessarily focused on teaching the past. It's focused on teaching how current modes of like governance and social consensus are reached. So we talk a little bit about Canadian history, but more in the context of like this was how Confederation happened. This is kind of the history of Canada since Confederation. But when you think about it, Canada is a very, very young nation. We're what, Laura, 153 years now, something like that. And when you compare that to lots of places, it's just we have no history. But we don't go out of our way to teach like British history of how a lot of colonization happened. We don't tend to talk about like what was going on in England and France that drove the colonization efforts here. And we sure as hell do not talk a lot about the First Nations history that happened once that colonization started happening here. There's been a movement towards including more of that in recent decades, but when Laura and I were in high school, there was like a little bit of a mention of it here and there, but after that, it was really not addressed. And I think that's because there's a lot of problems with the way that colonialism was handled, and there's a lot of people who don't have the qualifications to talk about it, to answer student questions and stuff like that in a way that is insightful and appropriate, because there's a lot of lingering unconscious racism and stuff like that that goes along with like talking about the residential schools and the 60s sweep and all of that. This is clearly an issue that I can go on and on about, so I'm going to watch myself because I can get pretty political. But yeah, it's definitely controversial. Social studies is really much more about why we do what we do as opposed to how we arrived at what we do. Teaches you about voting, teaches you about, you know, like electoral lineups and the membership or Parliament Legislative Assembly makeups and stuff like that. Um, but I don't know that I don't know that it's really that useful, I guess, is the short way of saying it. Um, but yeah, I have opinions. Patrick, I think I almost would have preferred that. Like, given what's been going on in Canada with repatriation and all of that, I think as a nation we would have benefited from far more looking at First Nations, particularly because there were so many different First Nations in Canada. Like we had many, many, many groups of people here, and they all get lumped together. They all get treated like they're the same thing, and that's just like, whoa, not cool. Um, but yeah, it would have been beneficial for us, I think, to learn about the British and the French and more about the tensions that drove them over here. And I think particularly it would have been really interesting to have a lot more information, given that we came from a Catholic school, about the role of Catholicism in expansionist politics, because the Canada has a separate school system. And what that did was originally it was to accommodate Catholics who didn't want to send their kids to school with Protestants because there was such a huge French Canadian Catholic population here as a result of colonialism. And that started expanding now to like charter schools for different faiths and for different ethnic groups and stuff like that, which I think is cool. I mean, if you want to teach your kids and you have the money to fund it and they still get the same curriculum as everyone else, cool, do the thing. But it would have been helpful for me to kind of understand why the Catholics get special treatment, because at the time they were really the ones getting the special treatment. It wasn't really being handed out to too many other people. And there's a lot of debates about the validity of that here. A lot of people just want to see the school system collapsed into one system, because taxes get paid differently and all kinds of stuff. There's a fair amount of politics that goes along with it. So it would have been nice for me to know that. And I was interested in that kind of stuff as a teenager. I don't know that a lot of people are, but I was. So, man, I would have loved it if we were getting told about the Constitution. Like, we definitely didn't get any work in terms of what our Constitution looks like. Really anything about like how we arrived at the rule of law or what that looks like for us. I'm in Alberta, definitely not from Quebec. Almost the complete opposite side of the country. I've lived in Alberta and Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan as an adult. But the culture between Alberta and where I was in Saskatchewan is very, very same. Um, there's larger cultural differences in like BC and Quebec, and the Northwest Territories, like the Yukon and Iqaluit for sure. But I would say that unless you're dealing with like the larger urban centers like Vancouver and Toronto, um, it tends to be pretty much the same from BC through to about Ontario. I would say Ontario has a different kind of work ethic. Quebec has a very different thing going on. And the Maritimes are definitely their own deal. And like their own deal unto themselves, not even grouped together. I care less about exams and more about like, you just should know this as a citizen. Like, the average Canadian born citizen could not pass a citizenship exam if they had to stand it. But we make people who want to enter our country take them and then say that they have to know this stuff to be a proper Canadian. And I'm like, well, if they have to know it, we should know it. There's no excuse for that. So I know that then you have to test for it to see if it's at least been taken up. But I think the value of having that as an adult creates that cultural unification that I think honestly Canada lacks a lot of. We didn't have to go through a revolutionary war to get our independence. There wasn't this like watershed moment of, oh, this is what it means to be Canadian. And I think that we're seeing some political splintering as a result of that, because there's very little for us to hang a common ground on. And I think that that's causing problems for us in terms of unification in the last 20 years. Social and history. What was the difference for you, Patrick? Like, I know that I'm kind of talking about it from our perspective, but can you kind of codify how they were different for you? Saxon is sleeping with his legs up the wall right now, and it's so cute. I don't know why he sleeps like that, but it's so funny. That's fair. Wasn't trying to put you on the spot, sorry. I think it's really cool that you can have those kinds of conversations. Especially that you have a country that could have gone in those directions. Like, I know the United States could have easily become a monarchy, like, super easily. And that it was really only that Washington was like, nope, don't want this, that it didn't. I think Canada kind of didn't really have much of a choice because we were set up as a constitutional monarchy. We still are. Um, it's very much like a nod and a smile thing now for most Canadians. It's like, oh, we have the Queen on our money. Okay, whatever. But the Queen really doesn't mean anything to most Canadians. Um, Especially like people who are French Canadian in origin or, you know, have immigrated from places that are not British. So I think everyone thinks their own history is really boring. I think that it has a lot to do with just being attuned to stuff that you already know. It's why we vacation to different parts of the world. I swear to God, it takes a special kind of skill to find the unusual at home. I'm grateful that there are people who love history, Patrick. Right? Like it's I think like it'd be interesting if you invested in it, if you got the experience of knowing more about it, but I think for a lot of people it's just, oh, this is where I'm from. It can't possibly be special. There's a great quote by Terry Pratchett. Oh, I'm not going to remember it properly right now, but it's something to the effect of the biggest reason why we leave home is so that we can come back and see it with fresh eyes and learn more about it as someone who's never seen it before. And I think that that's a super valuable perspective. I know that like I love to travel and I've been fortunate enough to have the experience of going overseas a few times and to a couple different places in Canada and the US. And that's privilege. And part of that privilege is coming home and going, oh my goodness, like I love this part of where I live, or this part of where I live really could use a change. And I love the perspective shift that that grants me. Um, so that's a super cool thing I think about traveling. Books do that for me too. Like if I read a good book, it'll help me kind of see things differently than perhaps I would have arrived at on my own. I'd love to travel and see the rest of Canada too. Like it's such a huge country. One of the things that I loved so much about moving to Saskatchewan was that I got to spend a lot of time there. Like I was there for 6 years. And getting to know a place on that kind of depth where you like learn the seasons and you learn what the sky looks like, and it was really beautiful. And I didn't really think Saskatchewan would be too much different than Alberta because I grew up in the foothills, so maybe where I was in Saskatchewan was a little bit different because it was straight up prairie. Um, but it was different enough to just be like, wow, like this is really incredible. And to give myself the time to take that on and to learn it was really wonderful. We could get posted anywhere with Dave's job. He really does not want to go to Quebec, which I can't blame him for. Um, but I'm looking forward to the opportunity to do that in more places. He doesn't really want to go off the prairies, which I can't blame him for either. But I have no objections. Let's go. Let's learn all the things. Go all the places. Yeah, seconding Patrick's question there, Naglis. I don't know what that means. Weapon storage. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, Laura, there might be something to that. I've definitely had thoughts like that myself the last little while because, like, my grandmother is First Nations, and because of the residential school stuff, we were never allowed to even consider that as part of our heritage because it had been such a problem for her. And there's been always this quiet attraction to me for me to First Nations clothing and music and practices and stuff, particularly for like Blackfeet, which is where my grandmother's lineage. But I feel like I'm not allowed to access it like someone who has that heritage. I feel very much like I have to come to it from a position of tourism because I was never given permission from my elder to access it like someone who belonged to it. And my biological father's family comes from Ireland and Scotland, and so there's a very huge Gaelic influence. And I've also always had an attraction to that, even before realizing that was his lineage. And again, feel like I have to approach it as a tourist because, like, he's been estranged from our family since I was a baby. So, again, never really being given authorization to go and explore this thing as someone who should have inherited it. Um, and I wonder like why the attractions are there and all that kind of thing. I think it's just really fascinating. But I wonder if like the tracing of roots is also kind of that wistfulness to be somewhere else when you're not content with the state of things where you are. It's kind of like a nostalgic longing for something that really never was in the span of your own lifetime. But I don't know about that either. It's just something that I wonder about sometimes. I don't understand, Neglis. Not too much blood relations? If you're asking if I have like related family, no, not really. Honestly, my family is very small and I'm estranged from a lot of things. Um, yeah, Patrick, you do have a lot of the military influence. No, Laura, I've never made it to the Fort Calgary Museum. I've actually like seen very, very little of Calgary. Um, I would like to just make a trip down and actually see some stuff in the city because I've never been there. I usually see friends and go to Sentry Box. That's it. So, the black marker. Which black marker? You'll find like most Canadians are a mix of immigrants on some level. Like, unless you were First Nations, you were not here first. So, my lineage is the color I have now is a bright green. Confused. Um, but most people will track like the dominant immigration path on both parents' sides. So like my mom's family is Scandinavian and Blackfoot, or yeah, and my biological father's family is uh, Scottish and Welsh, and my adopted dad's family is German Russian. So like I'm adopted into a German Russian Ukrainian esque family, but like that doesn't mean that's my lineage either necessarily. Um, but I think you'd find a lot of Canadians don't say, "Hey, I'm Canadian." I think they would say like, "I'm British Canadian," or "I'm French Canadian." Um, we tend to hyphenate a lot. To be a Canadian is a really, really odd thing, I find, because it generally means that you don't identify as Canadian first. Canadian itself tends to be a very strange placeholder, especially for people who were born here. Or at least that's my experience. Laura, I don't know if you'd say the same thing. Like, I definitely identify as Canadian first, mostly because I feel like I don't get to have access to these other areas of my ancestry. I'm what I call myself a Heinz 57 Canadian. I'm just a mutt. There's all kinds of people in my family. Yeah, I wonder what that's like, Naglis, because that's really not the Canadian experience. Like, we are really, really a nation of immigrants. Everybody here is from somewhere else. You might be like a couple generations Canadian, but your ancestors are almost guaranteed to have come from somewhere else. Yeah, Patrick, that is unfortunately true and very sad. Because you guys are similar to us in terms of like the demographics that make you up. Less French, though, unless you're over in Acadia. But the Americans, because of the revolution, also had way more to prove themselves against, like, not being British. And I think that that had a huge impact on how the culture developed too. Canada really never felt that pressure. The America thing is a terrible stereotype. Like, I think it's getting common around the world given the current political climate because of the way the media is representing things, but I don't think it's helpful in the overall discourse. It treats people not like people. And I think as soon as you start dehumanizing people, all kinds of problems come out of it. I think that's entirely possible. I know, like, in Canadian history, there's a little bit of a mention of the War of 1812, where the Canadians went in and sacked the White House because they were basically like, leave us alone. We don't want to do this. But, like, as far as I know, that's really the only armed conflict we've ever had with the United States. Because it was just like, no, we're going to be over here doing our thing, thanks. You do your thing. But I am not a history major by any stretch of the imagination, so it's possible that I have that wrong. Laura, that sounds really cool. Hey man, Canadian bacon is where it's at. True story. I think stippling is one of my primary ways of texturing for sure. I really love the lushness of the texture that you get when you're doing heavy, like layering work with mark making. I love cross hatching. I love stippling. I think it comes out of the fact that like I was really limited for the materials that I could afford when I was younger. And so I had to try and come up with as many textures as I could with like less money. So ballpoint pens were my friend. And I did everything I could with them. And you can create some absolutely incredible texture with a well broken in ballpoint pen. Like it's one of the most versatile pens in my opinion. I just wish that they got darker because they don't, and that's sad. Because I love heavy saturation when I'm working. Um, but yeah, I do think I rely on stippling a lot. I also find stippling really meditative. Like I know that's not true for a lot of people; they just find it to be a grind, but I really like it. It's comfortable for me. I like the pace of it. I like just how it kind of lets my mind relax. Think of it a little bit like knitting. Awesome. It gives you like just such great dimension, right? Yeah, I agree with you. There's a certain amount of stippling that I do with my eyes kind of unfocused, just kind of looking through the paper as opposed to looking at the paper. And I find that very relaxing as well. Really helps me stop from making too many patterns. This is the first time I've tried to use it for trees though, and I have to say I really like it. Like, I think that it's adding a lot to the texture of things. I'm really glad. Thank you for saying. Yeah, jungles are tricky. Like, I have to say, I'm struggling with them too, and I was kind of hoping that this might be a good solution because the texture of a jungle canopy is fairly round. I've been trying to figure out how to do it and not having much luck. So I'm kind of hoping that this is a good way. But like one of the problems for me with combining this is that my pine trees are lines, right? But this is much more kind of top down ish looking compared to like when I have my actual mountain ranges in and stuff, which are much more isometric. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to successfully integrate this style of forest with my pine forest in order to create like different biomes in the same map. I'm a little concerned about that. I don't know if it's going to work, but I mean, it's definitely worth a try. For sure, for sure. I find biomes are just so much easier to deal with in color because you can do, especially for like zoomed out maps like this, the color subtleties and the changes that you can make just, I think, portray things so much better than having to come up with a symbol every single time. Yeah, I'm curious to see how you handle that, Patrick, for sure, because that's kind of the transition that I want to be playing with in my stuff too. So, see how that goes. Yeah, shading for sure is a tricky thing. Oh no. I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh, Patrick. That was mean of me. I think your entry map looks really fantastic, Patrick. Hi, Saxon. How you doing, baby? Oh, I see. Did you have a good nap? Big stretch. Hi. No, my coffee's empty. I know you can smell it, but it's empty. Hi. Yes, I hear you. I can't comment on the voting. Well, I guess I probably could, but I probably shouldn't. Cathud puppy, my goodness. Oh, I guess, yeah, if it's not for my group, then it's fine. The one downside of stippling is that it does make me wonder if I am like taking too long to do certain projects, and then it prevents me from just becoming more prolific and therefore better by more repetition and failure. Because I definitely don't churn out maps as fast as some people. There's a link, it should be posted to the top of the page in the announcements. If you search the hashtag monthly map contest, that should come up there too. Doesn't have to be a scary map. Can be, but it doesn't have to be. We don't know if we're going to necessarily do themed maps for the monthly contests anymore because it just seems like way fewer people are into doing themed contests. We get asked for them and then nobody really does them, so it's like, oh, okay. This is a little bit weird to navigate. A Christmas map might be really fun, actually. I could see a lot of amusement with that. Oh, stretch. Oh, and hi. I'm so excited you're here. Sorry, I just looked up and saw the chat. Thank you. The blue is one of my favorite blues. I think that I may never go back. I enjoy it an awful lot. How do we feel about just leaving this a grassland? Do you think I'm obligated to turn all of the green into forests? Because I kind of like the idea of it as just plains. Leave it? Okay, cool. I like this plan. This plan works for me. Excellent. Yay, consensus. All right, let's get some more darker trees over here. Do people post their pens or not post their pens? Like, posting means to put the cap on the end. I always find it super weird to draw with a pen that's not posted. I have no idea why, but it's a thing. I'm really sensitive to the balance of it in my hand, apparently. Right. This area is Brazil. Too soon? Too soon. That's fair. I think it does depend on the cap. That's true. Like, I love posting on my Lammies. Like, these ones are my favorite to write with for my daily writing. But they feel really different when they're not posted because the pen is so much shorter. But super comfortable to write with when they're posted. Plus the lid, like, it keeps it from rotating in my hand, which is super handy. I have to admit, when I first had this area kind of open up in the map when I was doing the watercolor masking, I really wasn't sure how it was going to go. But I'm liking the look of all of these little lakes. They amuse me. I think they're pretty great. Okay, I think I'm gonna call this landmass finished for now. Maybe a little bit more right here. Move on over here. Does whatever a spider can. Where did it go? There it is. Didn't realize I was getting my hair in the shot. Sorry, guys. I think I really like this method, you guys. I'm excited. I'm excited. I think that's one of my favorite parts about doing cartography, honestly, is I feel like I get to play with a lot of stuff as opposed to like portraiture where it's gotta come out right or else everything is doomed. The only downside about this is that I do need like a fairly large range of colors for this kind of stippling in order to get the gradients that I want. I mean, it's not a terrible thing. It just means needing a lot of pens, which is something I do anyway because I'm a bit of an addict. So I guess it's not too bad. I'm glad you like it, Owen. I hope that you have a good rest of your day and text me later. Thanks for taking your work break with me. Yeah, this is for the Patreon, Patrick. I do a large map like this every month. And I upload it in both the JPEG and the Photoshop file so people can put their own labels on it and stuff like that if they are looking for a world map for a game that they're running or that kind of thing. I really like it too. Oh, goodness. You're free? You're done all your homework, Nicholas? Oh, free of one is pretty good. But you don't get better at math if you don't do it. Depends on what miniatures you're talking about. He very well could be. Do you have a list of stuff that you're selling off, or that you know someone who's selling off? He's primarily running Germans with leopards and panzers and Canadians, but I mean, he's also been picking up armies lately to donate to a gaming club that he's trying to start on base here. So I think it kind of depends. If you want to send me a message of what you think you've got and what you prices you want for them, then I can forward it to him. For sure. It might take a couple days for us to get an answer because he's in Latvia and would need to think about it, but definitely let me know. Yeah, Dave is in Riga currently and will be for the next year. Not quite a year now, I guess 10 months. He's been gone for 2 months already. Yes, I know he's near you geographically speaking. That's really amazing because that means that he's only 67 kilometers away from the distance that it takes me to drive to my nearest city from you. That is hilarious. He gets to go to Germany with the commander for a while in October, so I'm excited for him to get to do that. I don't know that he's gotten to go to Germany before. No, what I love about Riga is that it's got like the third highest concentration of Art Nouveau buildings in it in Europe, apparently. And I'm just like, oh boy, I need to go there and draw everything. Because I am very much a fan of the Art Nouveau movement. Because, yeah, Patrick, even if Dave isn't running those armies, I know like a bunch of the guys here are running different armies, so there very well could be a market here. I don't know too much about it other than like my house is where all the terrain lives. Because we have a lot of terrain for Flames of War. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm hopefully going to get to go to Riga towards the end of Dave's tour. We're going to meet up and do some other traveling at Christmas and then again in March, but I'm hoping to actually take a couple weeks and go to Riga right before he's ready to come home. I don't know, Villainous. What is it? Lithuania, okay. I don't know if we'll be able to because if I go to Riga, it would be during a portion of his tour that he wouldn't be allowed to leave the country because they have to apply for leave passes in order to do that. And we're taking his 2 leave passes for this tour to go traveling for ourselves. But I mean, I guess if we're on our way through Lithuania, we could stop there. Right now the plan is to do Scotland and England, and then how are we going to do it? England, like London specifically, for a few days, Scotland to see friends of ours for a few days, and then Montpellier in France because I have a friend there, and then Amsterdam to see Dexter and Brian, and then Dave wants to take me somewhere in Bavaria, and then back to London where I'll fly home from London and he'll go back to Riga from there. That's the Christmas trip. And then March, I think we're just going to be in England and Scotland, seeing the same friends again and just touring around. Honestly, everywhere I've looked up looks nice. I'm just excited that I get to go traveling. Very, very stoked. I have not been able to travel internationally for quite some time, and it's a thing that I love. So, very much looking forward to getting to do that again. I'm so lucky. Yeah, you were posted there, Patrick? That sounds so amazing. Saxony sounds wonderful. Oh, guys, I think I might need to call it. I need to get up and stretch for a bit. It's been 2 hours. How has it been 2 hours? We've been having a good morning, friends. I think it's looking pretty good. I'm happy with it so far. So, yay. I had a morning. I think Patrick also had a morning. Later morning than me, though, if I remember correctly. And Naglis, you're evening, aren't you? Laura's a morning, because Laura's the same time zone as I am. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, you guys. This really, really, really made my day. Well, I hope you sleep better tonight, Patrick. Have a good one, guys, and I'll post for the next stream. Okay? Take it easy.